So I can't believe it, we are hurtling into the second half of the year, and today I am bringing you my June reading wrap up. So I only read 13 books this month. Normally I like to aim for 15, but we're still on track. It's okay because the previous 2 months I read 16 books, so that balanced me out to my target, which is 15 a month. And it also means that as we finish the month of June, I have got 90 books under my belt for the first half of the year, which is exactly where I need to be in order to hit my target of 180 books for the year. In total, I've read 4,582 pages, which came out to about 152 pages per day. So in terms of how I read those books, one of them was an ARC, 2 were audiobooks. One I started to read as an audiobook and then finished up with a physical book. 7 were Kindle Unlimited books and 2 actual physical books. So I was really pleased. I actually started to read some physical books that are actually on my bookshelf. In terms of star ratings then, I had a pretty good reading month this month with 4 5-star reads, 3 4.5-star reads, 1 4-star read, 4 3.5 stars and 1 3-star read. And then in terms of the genres that I picked up this month, I had 1 contemporary, 5 dark romances, 2 mafia romances, 2 paranormal, 1 small town and 2 sports romances. So another good spread of books, with the majority as always being dark or mafia romances. Okay, so we kicked off the month in style when I picked up Surrender, which is written by Sam Mariano and Laura Lovett, and is also book 4 in the Coastal Elite series. And this is the series that I've been really enjoying from Sam Mariano. Now this book was originally released as Sophie's Surrender, but has been recently kind of revamped slightly with an additional chapter included in here. So of course it's a Sam Mariano book, so this one is a dark romance. We're looking here at forced proximity, captive situation, an absolutely obsessed hero that's not going to take no for an answer, and therefore you can also expect some dub con in here. The main hero in this one is Sylvan, and he is very much a typical Sam Mariano character, although maybe slightly softer than some of the other characters we've seen in this series so far. However, it is you know, Sam Mariano, so please make sure you read your trigger warnings as always. So the hero, like I said, in this one is Sylvan, and then our heroine is Sophie. And essentially this starts when the characters are at college. So we've moved on slightly from book 1, which is Even If It Hurts, which is kind of set in the singing area of high school. In terms of the timeline, Dare from that book has now moved to college, and this basically is kind of happening while these characters are at college. And Dare does make a small appearance in this one as well. This actually starts on Halloween. Sylvan is kind of hosting this Halloween party, and it's like a fancy dress party, and he has come dressed as a Viking. Obviously he's also from a very, very wealthy family. His father, we learn, is kind of connected to the mafia, a very dark kind of family that Sylvan comes from, and therefore very morally grey and not afraid to do whatever he wants to get whatever he wants. Sophie is meanwhile kind of a young innocent girl, and she really doesn't like socialising at all. Something happened to her at high school which has kind of really put her off from sort of socialising and going to parties and that sort of thing, but her roommate and also her mum really try and convince her to get out and about. So she decides that she is going to kind of placate them and go to this Halloween party. Of course she doesn't really want to be there at all, and when she gets there she really wishes she hadn't gone, but she goes. And when she gets there, she obviously bumps into Sylvan. Sylvan takes an instant liking for Sophie, and decides that he's going to lure her to his escape room. So he's put together this kind of like this escape room for the party, and he lures her into the escape room and essentially doesn't let her get out unless she can solve the clues. And when they get to the final room in this sort of escape room area, it's a bedroom, and he takes full advantage of the fact that she is trapped with him in there, doesn't have a phone, can't call for help, and he's not going to take no for an answer, and their kind of relationship goes from there. Really enjoyed this one. It's a 5-star read for me. I really enjoyed Sylvan's Vivian's character. I thought he was the perfect blend of kind of like dark, morally grey, would do anything for the heroine, won't take no for an answer, but also had a slightly softer side. He kind of read the signs from her a little bit, and pulled back when he needed to, but obviously constantly pushed the boundaries of what she was prepared to accept, because ultimately he was going to do what he was going to do anyway. It was just a case of convincing her that she wanted it too. So like I said, really enjoyed this one, 5-star read, and would definitely recommend. Then after that I picked up Fear Me, Love Me by Lilith, Vincent, and this is one that I picked for my TBR because it was one on a prompt card, which was to read a standalone book. But it was also one that I'd seen and heard, and I thought that it would be right up my alley, kind of a dark romance and also a labyrinth retelling. I'd also had a couple of people comment and suggest that I would actually like this book, and so I thought when I got the prompt for a standalone book, it was a perfect opportunity to pick this one up. So this is also kind of like a captive situation, very much repaying a debt. It's very, very loosely mafia related. I wouldn't actually call this a mafia romance. It's much more of a dark romance as far as I'm concerned. But the kind of the main hero in this one is supposed to be kind of like part of the mafia, or at least mafia-esque organisation, and also an age gap romance as well. There's some breeding kink in here, and I would almost say kind of it's kind of an erotic romance. Lots of sort of like kinks in this one, blood play and stuff like that. So definitely read your trigger and content warnings for this one as well. Now this one we're following Tyrant, who is our main villain slash hero in the story, and Vivian. And this is like a tale as old as time. It is a labyrinth retelling, like I say. It felt Beauty and the Beast-esque as well, because basically Vivian comes from this family. She's got a mum and dad and a like a half brother. She is not treated particularly well. Her family don't really care about her too much, and she does everything she can to make them love her. She wants to really be part of the family and really cares about her younger brother a lot, but like I say, her parents really don't care for her at all. Her father isn't a particularly good man. You know, he's one of those that goes out gambling and drinking and that sort of thing, and he owes a lot of people some money, and then one day he basically borrows some money from Tyrant, can't pay it back, and Tyrant comes to claim his cash. To make sure that his like Vivian's father pays up, he kind of takes her younger brother then hostage, and basically says that he will unalive the child if they don't pay him. Of course, Vivian is absolutely horrified, and therefore she goes after her brother to try and save him. Of course, is caught by Tyrant, and then he does her a deal, and basically he has this kind of maze in his garden, and he basically says, if you can enter the maze, get all the way through into the house, and rescue your brother, then you can take him freely, the debt is paid, we'll call it quits. But if you can't get through the maze, then you belong to me as well as your brother. And that's kind of then what happens. Of course, the maze isn't a simple place to escape from. There's lots of moving corridors, lots of doors that shift places, lots of things in there that kind of move around to keep the you know, the captive very much confused and going in the wrong direction. Tyrant, of course, though, cannot resist but go to Vivian in the maze. They have an intimate moment together, shall we say, and Tyrant takes her back to the house, and then Vivian takes this definitely as an opportunity to kind of bend the rules a little bit and say she made it through the maze into the house, and now she can take her brother. And then there is a bit of a time jump, but this book starts kind of in the future, and then we kind of work back into the past where we kind of discover everything that's kind of gone on, and we realise that Tyrant and Vivian have kind of got this very complex relationship with each other. She doesn't really want to be with him, but he won't leave her alone, and you know, she's trying to repair the relationship with her parents, and although she sacrificed herself to save her brother, they're really not appreciative of any of this at all, and things kind of like go from there. Now, I did enjoy this one, but I didn't absolutely love it. I didn't particularly warm to these characters at all. I didn't think the spicy scenes were particularly sexy, and it just fell a bit flat for me. It was a little bit lackluster, if I'm honest. I can see absolutely why people love this one. I just didn't absolutely think it was brilliant. That said, I did rate it 3.5 stars and rounded it up to 4 on Goodreads. Then, literally just as I put that book down, an opportunity for an ARC pinged into my mailbox. Now, I basically I'm on the ARC team for Poppy Aster. That's one of her pen names. She also writes under Daisy O'Donnell. Under Daisy O'Donnell, she does kind of like alien romances, and under Poppy Aster, she started to do some monster romances, some short stories slash novellas, and I really have been enjoying them. So Poppy Aster sent me this arc for her latest read, Stalking His Mate, and it's book 5 in the Monster Gentleman's Club. Like I said, it's a short story, just 120 pages, so this one's sort of about novella length, and it's basically a shifter romance, fated mates. So I've absolutely been loving this series of short stories. It's featured around this, like I say, this Monster Gentleman's Club. It's essentially like this kind of sex club for monsters, and what we know is that in this world there are all the regular monsters that we know and love: vampires, werewolves, fae, you know, you name it, they exist. But of course the humans don't know they exist, but they have sexual needs, sexual appetites, and they enjoy the pleasures of humans. So what actually happens at this club is that they have an auction night whereby humans can put themselves up for auction in exchange for quite a lot of money, and they get told what is actually going to happen to them. But to protect kind of like the monster community, at the end of the evening they are then given some sort of injection which makes them forget everything that they know. So they kind of know that they were put for auction, they know that they've got this money, but they don't remember anything about what happened. They can't talk about where they were or basically who these monsters are, and this is all for the monsters' protection. Of course, as we've seen through the series, couples have found their fated mates, so they've had to you know, figure out what they're going to do at the end of the evening. Are they going to let their women forget what's happened, or are they going to claim them? Of course, claiming them means that they're breaking quite a lot of rules, so that's a bit of a no-no. So that's really setting the scene for this story. We are following Amy and Dante. Dante is this mountain lion shifter, so he's kind of a cat, and he basically has been eaten in this diner. Amy is a waitress at this diner, and he recognises her straight away as his fated mate. Now he tries to date her the old-fashioned way. He asks her out on a couple of dates, but she constantly declines him, and not because she doesn't like him, but because she is a single mum. She's basically got herself out of a pretty bad relationship, and she really doesn't have time to date. She's just really trying to work, keep her head down, look after her child, and make ends meet. And so he hatches this plan. He thinks, well, I can help her. She obviously needs the money. I can basically convince her to do this auction. I will bid on her. I'll win her for the evening. She'll come out of this with loads of cash, and I'll get my chance with her. And this is kind of what he does. Of course, one night with her is not going to be enough, and there is going to be some repercussions the following morning when he attempts to take her without taking her memories. And so, yeah, I mean, it is a short book. I'm not going to say any more, but I really enjoyed this one. 4 stars, completely gobbled it up, and would recommend this series as a whole. So then after that, I picked up Smokeshow by Abbi, Glines, and I've got the physical copy of this book here. I did read it in the physical form as well. Basically, Abbi Glines is going to be an attending author at Rare 24 Edinburgh, which I'm going to later in the year. I actually won a copy of this book for a competition that Abbi Glines was hosting, and she sent this copy of this book to me, and you can see in there that this a signed book as well. Now, what I'd heard is that she writes sort of mafia cowboys, so southern cowboy mafia heroes, and I thought this sounded absolutely fantastic. So I asked for her to send me this first book in the Smoke series, Smokeshow, but it's also part 1 of a duet as well. So this couple in this book get 2 books. So I did go on to read the second book in the series as well, which was Fireball, straight after this one. So like I said, this is a mafia romance. It's a southern cowboy romance because this family are very kind of wealthy ranch owners, and they breed horses and that sort of thing as well. It's also an age gap, and there was some breeding kink in here as well. In this one, we're following Blaze and Maddie. Now, Blaze is kind of like heir to this mafia family. He's the eldest son, and he is well known for being pretty scary, pretty emotionless, and his eyes set on taking over for this family. It's a close-knit family though, close-knit community, and lots of people work on the ranch, like I say, that they own, and also a neighbouring ranch where they also train horses. So everyone kind of knows who they are. Everyone is afraid of them. They command a lot of authority in the area, but they are generally kind of loyal to the people in their community and in their family. And at the start of this book, Maddie enters the scene because Maddie has recently lost her father and brother. She'd lost her mother many years before when she was just a young girl, and so now she doesn't have any family. And at the funeral of these people, a very, very old friend of her mother's turns up, her mother's best friend, and says, "I'm so sorry about the loss of your father and your brother. I was best friends with your mum. She wouldn't want you to be on her own, and why don't you come and stay with me?" And having no other choice, really, no other options, Maddie agrees to go with her just until she gets herself back on her feet. And she goes back with this lady who takes her back to this kind of like this ranch, this cowboy community, if you like. And at first she has absolutely no idea how this woman really does know her. She has very few memories of her mum, and so she never knew about this best friend. Her father and brother never really talked about the mum too much, and so she is also desperate to kind of learn more about her mum as well and kind of what's been going on. And as we go through this story, we find out more and more about how Maddie is connected to this mafia family, why they would have brought her here, and kind of things go from there. Now, in terms of Blaze, when Blaze and Maddie first meet, they don't get on at all. Blaze has no interest in her and is actually quite rude to her. Maddie is obviously a bit upset that he's so rude, but also very, very wary of him. She is very aware that he is kind of a scary looking man, but she starts to make friends with some of the other people her age, and because Blaze is also a couple of years older than her as well. However, although Blaze has not treated her very well to start off with, it's very, very clear that he's very possessive of her, and although he was trying to encourage her to have other friends, he starts to realise he doesn't want her to have any other friends, but he wants her to be with him, and so he makes sure basically that he manoeuvres himself so that he doesn't allow any of the other men in the community to go near her, and he kind of claims her as his. Now, this is a duet, like I said. The second book in this one is Fireball. I went straight on to read that one as well because this first book does end on a bit of a cliffhanger, and I obviously wanted to see what happened and how things played out for this couple. Lots more happens in terms of like the plot, like I said, why is she there, what's she doing with this family, and what Blaze's interest in her actually is. And overall, I did enjoy this. It didn't blow me away, but I'm definitely intrigued to read more in the series, and I rated both books 3.5 stars. Okay, so then I finished an audiobook, The Score by Elle Kennedy, and I've been working my way through the series. So this particular one is book 3 in the Off-Campus series. Like I said, I listened to it as an audiobook. It was narrated brilliantly by Savannah Peachwood and Andrew Aiden. Really, really enjoyed it and rated it 4.5 stars. And in this one, we're following Ali and Dean. So we've heard about Dean before. I absolutely love this series and how they've built up this really good friendship group between these people. This is a sports romance. It's an ice hockey romance. So all of the men, all of the heroes in this series are part of the ice hockey team at a particular university. And we've heard a lot about this main character, Dean De Laurentiis. He is quite a ladies' man, never dates a woman twice, and is very happy-go-lucky, always up for a good time. Then we have Ali. She's our main heroine, and she happens to be best friends with Hannah, who is our heroine from book 1, who is now going out with Garrett Graham. Ali and Hannah are best friends, like I say, but they're also roommates, and in the previous 2 books, we've seen Ali before, and she previously had a long-term boyfriend called Sean. However, things have been off and on with them for a long time. They keep breaking up, getting back together and things like that. And recently, things have not been going too well, and Ali has now split up with Sean. But Sean is really not too happy about her decision and keeps kind of like, hassling her, texting her, wanting to see her. And she's afraid that he's just going to turn up out of the blue and she's going to have to face him, and she's just not ready to yet. So she tells Hannah, and Hannah says, "Hey, I'm going away for the weekend with Garrett. The house where the ice hockey team all live is going to be pretty empty. You're more than welcome to stay in Garrett's bedroom for the weekend. Just give yourself a bit of space, and then Sean can't track you down. The only person that's going to be there is Dean, but we're going to message Dean to let him know you're coming, and also to make sure he doesn't give you a hard time while you're there." So Ali says, "Yep, no problem," and she basically turns up. Of course, when she knocks on the door and she turns up, Dean is in the living room and he's not alone, and in fact he's not alone with one woman, he's alone with two women. Of course he immediately gets rid of them. He's very attentive to Ali, makes sure she's settled in and stuff like that, and they agree to basically sit down and watch a movie together, but they also decide they're going to have a drink. Now, one thing leads to another, they drink far too much and they end up having a one-night stand together. They've had a fantastic time. Now, like I say, Dean is a very happy-go-lucky guy. He's all up for this, and actually he shocks himself because he doesn't want it to be a one-night stand. He wants to explore this attraction that he has with Ali further. But of course Ali is a good girl, this is not the sort of thing she would normally do, and she's also a little bit horrified that of all the people that she chose, she ended up in Dean's bed because she knows he's a player, and so she's a little bit embarrassed as well. And so he really you know, works hard to convince her that they should, you know, carry on their fling, at first she's reluctant, but then finally agrees, and she said, okay, but it is only a fling, we can't get emotions cannot be involved, you know, I don't want anyone to know either. And so they kind of then start this kind of like relationship in secret, if you like, where they're just going to be each other's booty call, and their relationship really does go from there. As all of the other characters in Elle Kennedy's stories, Dean is such a great character. He's got so many layers. We find out he's way more than this playboy that everyone thinks he is, and he and Ali become really good friends, and are there for each other, to support each other when they need it. Of course, there's loads more stuff going on. Dean's had a pretty rough past. We find out why he is the way he is with women, and he had a relationship in the past that maybe didn't go so well, and he maybe made a few mistakes, and also Ali is working out a few things as well with her life in terms of what's going on with Sean, and also what she wants to do in the future, as well as a fairly sick dad. So lots of things to work through, but as always, I really liked the energy of Elle Kennedy's books. I really liked her writing. The audiobook was really well done, and I absolutely love these characters, love this story and the way it played out, so would highly recommend. After that, I then also picked up Full Throttle by Melanie Moreland, and this was a new release that came out on the 13th of June. It was a relatively shortish book and was book 5 in the Reynolds Restoration series that I've been reading. It's like a small town romance that's set around Reynolds Restorations, which is this sort of garage in this small town, and all of the main heroes in this one are like a mechanic who work at this garage. I listened to this one as an audiobook, and it was narrated by Maxine Mitchell and John Lane. And like I said, this one is very much a small town romance. It featured an older couple, so an older couple in their late 40s, early 50s. The main character in this one was a single mum, albeit to a grown-up daughter. But what I liked about this one is there was absolutely no angst or third act breakup. It was pretty insta-lovey, if I'm honest, and we were following Dom and Cherry. So this one, in terms of the timeline of this one takes place in the same timeline as book 4. So when Cherry's daughter ends up with her partner Chase, it's at the same time, because she comes to help them settle in at their house, do the decorating, look after the garden, that sort of thing, and then also Dom comes around to help Chase out, because Chase is one of the guys, the mechanics at the garage. So Cherry and Dom end up seeing quite a lot of each other when they're getting together with their friends for barbecues, helping Chase and Hannah do up the house and that sort of thing. Now, Dom takes an absolute instant shine to Cherry. He really likes her from the get-go, and although Cherry does try and put up a bit of a fight, it's not too long before she completely relents and goes out with Dom, and he treats her like a queen. And so, like I say, this is very insta-lovey, there's very low angst in this one. It's a fairly short read as well, so I whipped through this one. And really the only kind of drama in this one was the fact that Dom actually did have a son from a previous relationship. The mother of his son wouldn't let him see him, and so there's a bit of a court case going on for him to try and get shared custody of his son. As a result, I did enjoy it. I thought it was a nice end to this particular series, but it didn't wow me. So overall I gave it 3.5 stars, rounded up to 4 on Goodreads, but wasn't my favourite in the series. Okay, so after that I finished God of War by Rina Kent. This was new release on the 13th of June. It's book 6 in the Legacy of the Gods series, and the final one that Rina Kent is going to be writing in this particular series. It's a dark romance. It's also an amnesia romance, enemies to lovers, and also a marriage of convenience. Now, I'd highly anticipated this final book because we're following Eli and Ava, and they have had a very kind of confrontational, tumultuous relationship right from the very get-go. And this one has a very, very different vibe and feel to the other books in the series, and it actually takes place a couple of years after they've all finished at college, at the university where they're all at. We do get a lot of cameos from the other characters as well, so we see them in here. But this one, like I say, it's got definitely a different vibe to the others. It's still a very dark romance, but dark in a very different way to the others. Yes, Eli is still a very, very kind of dominant, obsessive, controlling kind of hero, so very similar to the other characters. But Ava herself is in a very different position, and their relationship is very different from the others that we've seen. In fact, this one was actually quite difficult to read. I actually read it in parts over a number of days. Still, I absolutely loved it. It was very difficult and challenging to read, but overall I thought it was fantastically written, and while not my favourite in the series, I absolutely thought it was brilliantly done, and I rated it 5 stars. So like I said, this is an amnesia romance, and what actually happens right at the start of this book is that Ava wakes up in hospital with no memories from the last 2 years, but she discovers that she's married to Eli. Now, she actually really does not like Eli at all, can't understand why she would marry him, and doesn't remember anything about what's happened. What we then start to uncover is what has happened in the last 2 years, and so this is done kind of as a series of kind of flashbacks in a way, where she starts to remember some elements that have happened. Some of her friends tell her some of the things about what's happened, and we start to learn what has happened, why she's in the position that she's in, and how they arrived at this particular place. And then obviously it's because she's lost her memories, it's kind of like a fresh start for them in a way as a couple, and they start to then kind of develop this new relationship that they haven't had before, and kind of really start to find their feet with each other. Now, from the very, very beginning, it was very clear to me that Eli was in love with Ava, but for whatever reason didn't want to show his emotions to her. It's also very, very clear that Ava has always been in love with Eli as well, but something happened in their past which meant that she was rejected by him, was very embarrassed about what happened, and then this love that she had for him very much turned to hatred, and they had then this animosity for years towards one another. What we also discover is that Ava is struggling really, really heavily with her mental health, and she needs medication to make sure that she remains kind of like consistent in her personality, but also it's meant that over the years she's chosen to self-medicate through kind of like quite a party kind of lifestyle, where she, you know, hangs out with the wrong people, goes to lots of parties, drinks a lot of alcohol when she really shouldn't, and it's kind of in her mind it's a way to kind of self-medicate and to kind of forget about her real problems, but obviously they're all deeply rooted in the issues she has from a mental health perspective. And we also learn that these are genetic, you know, it's something that she's inherited, and it's because of her grandmother, who in a previous Rina Kent series, kind of like when we actually read Ava's parents' love story, we also found out that her grandmother was mentally ill as well, and kind of Ava is inherited some of these traits, and therefore her parents have always been very afraid for her, and her friends have also kind of pandered to her quite a lot and not really helped, and Eli has then kind of taken it upon himself to do the thing that no one else wanted to do, and that's you know, be cruel to be kind, I don't want to say any more in terms of what's happened or why they are in this position that they're in. But like I say, it's clear that Eli really does have feelings for Ava, and is trying to do the best for her in the only way that he knows how, which may be not the way that normal people would go about things. Like I said, as a result, it was quite difficult to read in parts, very, very sad, but also a great ending to this series, and would highly recommend. So after that I picked up and read For the Love of Leila by Callie Moss. This is a standalone book, and I picked this up because I picked it from the jar. It was a recommendation from a viewer, Zemina Vasquez 525, so thank you very much for the recommendation. And this is a dark stalker romance, kind of a billionaire romance, and very much a psychopath hero in this one as well. And we were following Layla, who is obviously the namesake of the book, and Liam. Now this one was a very interesting read. It's got some very mixed reviews on Goodreads and also on Amazon, and I completely see why the audience was so divided on this one. I myself kind of enjoyed the story, I enjoyed the premise, but I also thought that the book had some issues, which meant that I didn't enjoy it as much as I really wanted to, and I ended up, after kind of like debating exactly what rating I was going to give this one, I ended up rating it 3 stars. So some of the reviews were particularly focused on the writing, the quality of the editing, and also the formatting of this book, and I completely understand that and can agree. This particularly wasn't a well edited read. Parts of the book felt a bit disjointed, and the formatting on the Kindle version of the book was not very well done, and I think it did detract a little bit from the joy of reading this one. In addition to that, I never 100% warmed to these characters, and I didn't really feel the love story between these two. Now this one has also got an optional epilogue at the end of this one, but it didn't feel particularly optional when I was reading the Kindle, because it just went from the last chapter to the epilogue, and of course you just continue to read. It didn't sort of say stop here if you don't want to read the epilogue, this extra bit is the optional part, but people very much said it was an optional epilogue, but like I say, it didn't feel like that to me when I was reading it. I just carried on reading, obviously. Essentially what happens in here is Liam is our psychopath hero. He's also a billionaire. He's got the sort of personality where he becomes very, very obsessed and focused on specific things, and until he meets Layla, his focus is very much on work, on business, on growing his billions, until the day Layla literally bumps into him and his focus very much snaps to her. Now he's very charming and charismatic to start with. He convinces her to go out on some dates with him, and they start a relationship. But of course the cracks start to show in his personality after just a couple of months. He becomes much more controlling, much more possessive, giving her you know, demands about what she should wear, who she should speak to, and all of that sort of stuff. She's willing to turn a blind eye because she really likes this guy. She's kind of fallen in love with him, but it comes to a bit of a head when her boss is inappropriate with her in the office. She happens to tell Liam. Liam is so enraged that he basically goes into the office, beats this man almost to death, and basically stabs him through the hand. Of course, Layla walks in on this, sees what Liam has done, and then realises what a complete and utter psychopath this guy really is, and she's like, basically, you've gone too far. Yes, the guy touched me inappropriately, but this was completely not the way to deal with it, and you know, your reaction is way too much over the top and also crazy, and therefore I don't think I want to see you anymore. And so she kind of breaks up with Liam. Now Liam then becomes very, very enraged and even more obsessed than he was before, and starts to stalk her, puts cameras in her rooms, kind of watches her when she's asleep, and all of that sort of creepy stuff. Now normally I like a stalker romance, but it never really felt like I say, like this couple were really in love, and he just did feel really, really creepy. And then of course eventually starts showing back up in her life, and she kind of tries to push him away because she's very kind of scared of him, but he's like, you know, ultimately he's going to make sure, he's going to engineer the situation so they end up together. However, he crosses too many lines, and it comes to the point really where he's not going to get away with quite a lot of stuff that he's done, and hence this you know, how the book actually ends, and then this optional epilogue. So I'm not going to say any more about that, but like I said, I was intrigued to read this one. I did enjoy parts of it, but for me the quality of the editing was a little bit off-putting, but also I never really bought into their love story, and that they should really be together, or understand why Layla really did end up kind of being in love with Liam and prepared to overlook all of his faults, because there were a lot of red flags there for sure. So then I went on to read this one here, A Hunger Like No Other by Kresley Cole. This is book 1 in the Immortal After Dark series. Now, quite an old series now, there's 21 books in this series, so quite an investment, but I've always been really intrigued to read this. And I thought I would give it a try. In fact, it was a perfect time to do this because recently Jen offered some annotated books, which she does from time to time. And this was one of the options, and I thought I'd give that a go. So this one has got lots of sort of comments in here where she's picked out sections of the book that she likes and kind of highlighted some passages and put her thoughts down on here. So I really enjoyed reading this one, because as I went through and I could read some of Jen's comments as well, it kind of really made me smile and feel like, you know, we were kind of like reading this one together. This is a paranormal sort of romance. It's fated mates, enemies to lovers. There's definitely an age gap in here, and also this couple go on a bit of a road trip as well. So I actually read this physical copy, like I said, and really enjoyed this one. Rated this one 4.5 stars, and we are following Lachlan and Emmeline. Now, Lachlan in this one is basically a werewolf, not quite as we understand werewolves, but a werewolf nonetheless. And it's clear that he is hundreds of years old and has his sort of like clan, his family if you like. He's in charge of this clan, by the way, he's head of this clan, but he was also at war with the vampires, and he was captured by this very cruel vampire called Demetrius and then put into his dungeon and has been tortured for the last 150 years. Essentially, they set fire to him until he dies, but of course he's immortal, so he can't die, and then his body regenerates, and then they start the torture all over again. And this poor man, this poor Lachlan, he is absolutely close to madness, and the only thing that's kept him from going completely insane is the anger that sits within him, with absolute determination that one day he'll escape and he'll exact his revenge. However, he's never 100% had the strength to escape until one night he sniffs out his fated mate. So he senses his fated mate is nearby, and this turns his inner beast absolutely feral, where he absolutely then has to do anything he can to get out of his chains, quite literally, and track down this mate of his that he's been waiting hundreds of years to finally get his hands on. So he has quite a battle to get out of this chains, and in the end rips off his own leg in order to escape. Of course, he can regenerate, so his leg will regenerate, but still pretty traumatic thing for him to have to do. And it takes him a while to track down his mate, because he did sense her, but she's not directly there, so he kind of like spends about a week in the city trying to track her down. Of course, by the time he actually catches up with her, he is still pretty crazy, still pretty feral, and is not in his right mind. And he's angered even more when he realises that his fated mate is not a werewolf like him, which he always thought she would be if he ever found her, but it turns out that she is a vampire, and therefore one of his sworn enemies. And so when he first meets her, he is not the best guy. He has some horrible thoughts, he makes some terrible actions and decisions, but ultimately Emmeline and Lachlan are kind of like bound together, and in the end he convinces her to go on a road trip with him so he can make his way from where they are, which is actually in Paris, and get themselves to the UK, and then drive from London to his ancestral home, which is in Scotland. And she agrees to go with him and has every intention of leaving him when they finally arrive and he's there safely, except of course he's not going to let her go because she is his fated mate. The thing is though, things get quite complicated because she's not 100% vampire, she is part Valkyrie as well. She's always been under the protection of her aunts, who are also very powerful Valkyrie, and they want her back. And Lachlan's going to have to risk a bit of a war in order to make sure he keeps hold of his mate. Now, like I said, he's a bit of an asshole at the start of this book. He really is, makes some very bad decisions, but ultimately comes around and ends up being a very passionate and loving partner, and will do anything for Emmeline. So he definitely did win me round, but it was a very rocky start, but thoroughly enjoyed this and will definitely be going on to read more in this series. Then another one that I've had on my shelf for a while is this one, King of Greed by Anna Huang, and I read this one particularly this month because it was a book that I picked out of my jar. In fact, it's a smaller jar, because this is one of my favourite booktubers' favourite reads of 2023, and this was recommended by Jesson from Jesson Reads Romance. So I've only ever read one Anna Huang book before, which I really enjoyed, and I have definitely wanted to read more, and I was very intrigued by this particular one, which is book 3 in her newest series, the Kings of Sin series, particularly because this is a kind of a marriage in trouble sort of trope. It's second chance, and this couple have been married kind of for 10 years, and I was just really intrigued by the premise of this one, and how this one was going to go. Now, I started reading this one as an audiobook. It was narrated by Teddy Hamilton and Vanessa Vesquez, and it was very, very brilliantly done. However, I tend to only read audiobooks when I'm travelling. I finally got home and I really wanted to carry on reading this one, and so because I had the physical book, I ended up finishing this one in physical book form. So half of it I listened to as an audiobook, and the rest of it I just finished up reading this book. So this is a contemporary romance. It's a billionaire romance, like I said, second chance, marriage in trouble, and we're following Dominic and Alessandra. Now, like I said, Dominic and Alessandra have been married for about 10 years at the start of this book, and they met when both of them really didn't have very much. Now, and Alessandra did come from a fairly wealthy family, but Dominic came from a very poor family, and he was really struggling to make ends meet. He was you know, working in college, working 3 jobs to pay all his bills and everything, and he was extremely ambitious. But he meets Alessandra in college. They absolutely fall in love. It's a whirlwind romance, absolutely passionately in love with each other, and they get married at a very young age with their whole lives ahead of them and all of the hopes and dreams that they had. And Dominic had very much set his sights on being an absolute provider, earning a lot of money, and over the years he's built up a very, very profitable and very successful investment business, and he is now a multi-billionaire. The thing is, in his pursuit of all of this wealth, which he, you know, he really strived for because he didn't want to ever have to worry about money again, he didn't want to ever struggle again, and he wanted to provide Alessandra everything he felt that she deserved, his focus became too much on his business, and over the years he started to give Alessandra less and less attention until we get to their 10th wedding anniversary, and he's promised to finish work early so they can go away for the weekend, and she's really hanging all of her hopes on this weekend that they can spend some time together and maybe rekindle some part of their relationship that they've started to lose. And of course, Dominic has an emergency at work, he's late, he forgets, and Alessandra is sitting there alone waiting for him to turn up, knowing that he's not going to arrive, and she's absolutely heartbroken. But this is the absolute final straw, and she decides that she's going to leave him, and so she does. So Alessandra leaves Dominic, and she also files for divorce, and this is an absolute wake-up call that Dominic severely needed. He is absolutely devastated, and he starts to realise that although he was completely fixated on his business and earning more and more money, as soon as he loses Alessandra, he realises that actually none of that matters if she's not in his life, and he starts to realise what he's done, what mistakes that he's made, and how terribly he's treated her, and how heartbroken she really is. And this really breaks Dominic's heart as well, because he cannot stand the thought that the love of his life, the woman he would do anything for, has, you know, left him because of all of the things that he has not done for her in the last 10 years. And so then begins the story of Dominic trying to make up for this. I would say 80% of this book is Dominic grovelling, finding a way to win back Alessandra's trust and convincing her that she should give him another chance, and he won't make the same mistake again. Of course, it's going to be quite a long uphill battle. Alessandra is not a weak woman, she's not going to give in that easily, but we have every faith in Dominic that he is going to push through and win Alexandra's heart back once more. So I really did enjoy this one. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Rated this one 4.5 stars as well, rounded it up to 5 on Goodreads. We do meet a character in here that I'm very intrigued by, because Dominic has kind of a brother. It's not strictly a biological brother, blood related, but they grew up in foster care together, and he seems to be a bit of a bad guy. In fact, it seems to be that he's some sort of an assassin, and he kind of comes into this story and then kind of goes again, and it's very mysterious. But I am very intrigued to see if he gets his own book in the future, because I would really like to know more about him, because of course I absolutely love a bad boy, and he is completely tickled my fancy. It's a really warm day here in the UK, not as warm as some other countries around the world, but warm for us in the UK, and my camera keeps overheating. So I've just put a fresh battery in. Hopefully that will keep it cool enough so that I can finish off the last 2 books. The last 2 books I read were absolute winners, standout books for this month, and they were both 5-star reads. And the first one is Brutal Ambition by Sam Mariano. Now, this is a standalone book, but it is a spin-off from her Coastal Elite series, and it does take place in a parallel timeline to Surrender, which is book 4 in that series. So this is another dark romance. It's set when the characters were in college, and it's also set around this secret society. We have got Killian in this one, who is a member of the secret society, and we also then have some cameo appearances, not only from Sylvan from book 4, Surrender, because he also happens to be in the secret society, but also the bad pill, the bad penny that keeps turning up at Dare from book 1, even if it hurts. He's also managed to get himself a seat at in this secret society, of course. Of course he has. So he makes a brief appearance in this one as well. And I hate to say it, but he's growing on me more and more. In the Sleeping Beauty chapter, which is the bonus chapter at the end of Surrender, we find out a little bit more, and it gave me the smallest spark of hope that Dare would end up being a good guy, or at least he and Aubrey would get a HEA, a real one. And when he popped up in here as well, it also kind of like felt familiar, you know, it just felt familiar, and I didn't hate him quite as much as I had before. But that's as an aside. So, like I say, this one focuses on Killian, and our main heroine in this one is Bryn. Now, this also happens, starts in a very similar place to Surrender, because it happens kind of during the Halloween party that Sylvan was hosting, remember, from Surrender. Like I say, these guys are part of like this secret society, and they are properly dark, but there are wannabes. There's wannabes at this university. They wanted to be part of the secret society, but they're just not dark enough. They're not bad enough to get in, and so they've decided they're going to try and start their own little secret society. And of course, the way they're going to do that is by capturing a virgin, taking her virginity, and then maybe sacrificing her to some secret society god, not really sure. And of course then, Bryn, our heroine in this one, is going to be our sacrificial lamb. So at the start of this book, she is invited to a Halloween party by this guy called Kyle. She thinks he's quite charming and sweet, and she decides that she'll go along on this date with him. Now, she has absolutely got this fantasy about Phantom of the Opera, so she goes dressed as Christine from Phantom of the Opera, basically. She goes to this Halloween party and then is lured down into the basement where Kyle and his friends are waiting to have their wicked way with her, and, you know, help them to establish the secret society, like I said. Of course, the actual secret society themselves, the Blue Bloods as they are called, have heard about this, and they are going to put a stop to it, because one, they don't want to draw unnecessary attention to themselves, and also they want to put this wannabe group in their place. So of course Killian is going to be there to break up their little party, and so as she's being strapped down to a table, she's starting to realise that things are really serious and something bad is going to happen to her. Killian obviously intervenes and essentially becomes her hero because he rescues her. But when they escape, then they have to run through the woods, and then he basically takes her to this car, and then she starts to wonder if actually this is a whole ruse, and maybe this is part of the plan, and she's running willingly with him through the woods, and he's really the baddie. So it's very tense there for a few moments, and of course Killian keeps telling her repeatedly, I may have rescued you, but I am not a hero. Don't think that I am one. However, I think Killian was actually quite a soft, gentle hero from a Sam Mariano perspective. It was about 34% into this book, and Killian had been quite a big softie, I have to say. Not only had he rescued her from this situation, he was actually very reasonable. He didn't steamroll over her decisions. He was obviously very controlling, quite forceful. She didn't have a lot of say in what was going on, but he made her feel that she did. And also, when she asked him no, and he saw that she was serious when he said no, he did step back. And so by the time I got to the 34% mark, I was like waiting for the other shoe to drop, because I was thinking, why is this guy being so nice? I mean, not nice, nice, Sam Mariano nice. Why is this guy being so nice? What is actually going on? What is actually going to happen? And what is going to happen to our heroine? And of course, from there, things really did start to kick off. We find out way more about what's going on with the secret society, this Blue Bloods, what they're actually prepared to do. You know, some interesting characters, and kind of what happens to Bryn, because she knows maybe a little bit more than she should. Bryn is the type of heroine though that kind of doesn't have a preservation gene, because she keeps getting herself into really bad situations and going out on dates with men that are going to ultimately kidnap her. But I didn't feel that she was stupid, you know. I didn't feel like she was one of these heroines that were just blindly, stupidly going into these situations. But she definitely didn't, like I say, have a preservation gene at all. She just, you know, kept running into danger, basically. But luckily for her, Killian wasn't going to be too mean to her, and she was going to come through this journey reasonably unscathed. But like I said, really did enjoy this one. I liked how it turned out, and would highly recommend. And then finally, I've just finished today False Start by Kandi Steiner, and this is book 5 in her Red Zone Rivals series. It's a new release. It literally came out on the 7th of this month, and there's quite a big gap between book 4 and this one, because I think she was finished and then she decided, or maybe her fans asked her to write a book about Kyle. So this is a sports romance. It's actually a football romance. Books 1 to 4 actually take place in college, but now all of the teammates and everything, all the couples that we've seen in books 1, 3 to 4, they've all graduated. Most of the characters have now gone on to be professional football players in the NFL, and that is also true for Kyle Robbins, who in books 1 through 4 was a bit of an asshole, let's admit it. He wasn't a particularly nice character, was always provoking them, seemed really self-centered and selfish, constantly cared more about his social media following and the sponsorships he could provide than actually caring about the people in his team. But we secretly knew all along that he was going to redeem himself one day, and that basically there was more to him than met the eye. And in this book we find out all about that. So this starts basically where he is in his rookie year of the NFL. He's moved across country, he's now in Seattle, and he needs to buy a property, somewhere to live. And so he calls a real estate agent to ask to be shown around this very nice big house, and who should come to show him around the house but a woman called Madeline. Now as soon as he sees her, he obviously recognises her because they knew each other in high school. In fact, Madeline is just a couple of years older than him, not a massive age gap, but 2 years older than him, and actually used to babysit him. So when he was 14, 15 and she was 16, 17, she basically babysat him, and not because he needed a babysitter, but his parents couldn't trust him not to have a party when they weren't there. And so Madeline would like kind of just stay with him, make sure he was keeping out of mischief. And they became very good friends. So they actually really enjoyed each other's company, became really good friends, and then over time their friendship turned into something more, and they became lovers and also fell in love, but still obviously teenagers. What we discover is that they are separated through no fault of their own, but each of the other thinks that they left each other. So Carl thinks that she left him, and she thinks he also kind of abandoned her because of stuff that was going on with their parents at the time they didn't realise. And so Kyle then kind of went into a bit of a tailspin. That's why he ended up being a bit of an idiot, and he was always really kind of heartbroken about what happened with him and Madeline. Now Madeline went on to marry someone else and have a child, and again at the start of this book they bump into each other when she's going to show him around the house, but by this time as well she's also already divorced and her child is now 6 years old. And although Carl always thought, you know, he hated her after what happened, as soon as he sets eyes on her again he realised he doesn't hate her at all. He doesn't care what happened in the past. He knew that we're only teenagers, and these things happen, but he cares about her very much still and wants to be part of her life. And when he finds out that her ex-husband is not a particularly nice man and has been abusive towards her, he basically offers to protect her and say, let's fake date. So I will make sure that I'm always there when your ex-husband comes to pick up your child, and in return you can come with me to Clay and Gianna's wedding, because I am sick of being the butt of all the jokes because I'm always turning up by myself. And so they kind of make this fake dating arrangement, but of course they're not really going to fake date for very long, because they still are absolutely attracted to one another, they still really love each other. And what I really liked about this story is that there was no miscommunication, there was no angst, there was no third act breakup. They were completely adults about the situation. They asked each other questions, they took the time to listen, they didn't jump to conclusions, and they were able to work through their past so that they could move forward in their future. In fact, the only real angst or drama in this one is the ex-husband. He is a real asshole, he really is, and they end up having to take him to court for full custody of Madeline's son. But that is the main drama in this one. The rest of it was really, really romantic. It was really, really emotional. Through this one as well, there's lots of discussions around babies and having children, and also as a trigger warning, just so you're aware, also discussion like of loss of a child as well. And I don't know if it was more emotional because I know that Kandi Steiner herself was pregnant at the time of writing this book, and you know, I really felt like she put a lot of emotion into it, like it was like really empathetic towards how a mother would actually feel about a child, how protective a mother would be, and how much love that parents would have for their children, and what they do to make sure that they had a healthy and happy life. So that made it extra emotional for me. I'm not ashamed to say that I spent quite a lot of the last part of this book crying because it was so emotional, it was so sweet, and some of the things that Carl did for Madeline were really, really top tier. So overall, Carl really impressed me. He absolutely won me around, and I really, really enjoyed their love story, and I couldn't help myself but gave this one 5 stars, mainly because of all the crying I did with this one. So like I said, an absolutely fantastic end to the month of June, because I finished with 2 5-star reads, very, very different books, you know, going from a Sam Mariano dark romance to something so romantic like False Start by Kandi Steiner, but I absolutely loved both of them, so really happy with how the month ended. So there we go, that's all 13 books that I read this month. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content from me, and I'll see you next time. Bye. So after that I picked up and read For the Love of Leila. And it is basically a stalker, not a stalker. Well, we're well and truly hurtling. Another month is over, which can only mean one thing. It's time for you. It's time for you. It's time for me. It's heat exhaustion, that's what it is. Hello. Thank you for joining me. I was going to say thank you for dialing in. They didn't dial in, Helen, it's not 1974.